Hume's attack on inductive reasoning awoke the genius of the 18th century Prussian philosopher Immanuel Kant. Kant, roused from his dogmatic slumbers, launched himself on a program to integrate the subjectivity inherent in Hume's view with a theory that could incorporate the unknowability of the world in itself. Kant sought to close the gap between the rationalist and empiricist traditions by synthesizing them into a single, coherent thesis.
Kant certainly saw himself as coming at a pivotal position, and he thought he recognized defects in both the rationalist and the empiricist traditions. Indeed, to some extent, he defined those two traditions in order to explain the defects in both and to synthesize what was true in the two of them, to use one of his own favorite words.
With one bold stroke, Kant turned the tables on Hume, asserting that while we can't derive causality from experience, the fact that we have such a mental framework is vitally important. The fact is, we all share these categories of experience. So while causality may not exist out there in the world, what matters is that we all still experience the world in the same way. The mind makes the world, not the other way around.
Kant prided himself on what he called the Copernican revolution in philosophy, the idea that actually the mind structures the way reality can appear to us, and in a sense, reality has to conform to the laws of the mind, rather than the mind trying to discover what laws of reality are, which are completely external to it. Kant put the mind in a different relation to reality than any of his predecessors. His predecessors had thought of the mind as a passive observer of reality, and had sort of looked around for some kind of guarantee that it was a good passive observer of reality.
Kant was a master at drawing distinctions. One pre-existing distinction he affirmed was between a priori judgments, which are based on reason, and a posteriori judgments based on experience. A priori judgments, such as 2 + 2 = 4, are necessarily true, while a posteriori judgments, this car is red or today it is raining, are contingent, forever tied to the circumstances of experience. Kant made a further crucial distinction between analytic and synthetic judgments. Analytic judgments take the form of sentences that have predicates which are wholly contained in their subjects, such as, all bachelors are unmarried. Synthetic judgments have predicates that are distinct from their subjects. Kant used the example, all bodies are heavy. Thus, they add something that we didn't already know to the subject. Then, in a sharp break with his predecessors, Kant proposed we need to consider all 4 possible kinds of judgment: analytic a posteriori, synthetic a posteriori, analytic a priori, and synthetic a priori. Since all a posteriori judgments are synthetic, an analytic a posteriori judgment is not a real possibility. Further, he asserted that synthetic a priori judgments not only are possible, but in fact serve as the foundation for mathematics and natural science.
Kant's innovation was, in technical terms, was to think that there was such a thing, and that he could demonstrate there to be such a thing as synthetic but a priori knowledge. That is, knowledge that goes beyond the concepts involved, or knowledge, more precisely, knowledge that a predicate applies to objects which is not already implied by the subject concept, but which yet can be known to be true universally and necessarily, and therefore must somehow be known to be true independently of experience.
That a straight line between 2 points is the shortest is a synthetic proposition. For my concept of straight contains no notion of quantity, but only of quality. The concept of shortest is thus wholly an addition, and it cannot be derived by any analysis from the concept of a straight line. Intuition must, therefore, lend its aid here, by means of which alone is this synthesis possible.
Kant took his radical notion of a priori synthetic judgments and applied it to aesthetics, ethics, and political philosophy. In moral philosophy, he put forth what he called the categorical imperative, a proposition to rationally guide our actions. Act in such a way that the maxim of your action can be willed as a universal law.
Kant's ethics is based on the idea that we simply apply rationality to action, and when we do that, we see that we should act in universally valid ways, universally acceptable ways, and that actions are wrong if the success of the proposed action depends upon making an exception of yourself.
For Kant, the autonomy of the will was the guiding principle for all moral laws and for all duties stemming from them. It is the guarantee of man's dignity and his equality under the law.
At the most basic level, Kant's moral philosophy leads to a liberal political philosophy because he believes that there's a natural connection between freedom of choice and freedom of action. And if one ought to be free to choose one's objectives and to choose one's way of life, then one also ought to be free to act upon that choice.
Kant believed that reason can't leapfrog beyond the world of experience to the world in itself. Metaphysics, however, consists of a set of propositions on what lies beyond our experience. As a result, Kant declared that metaphysics was impossible. And so the stage was set for an eruption of philosophy in response to Kant, beginning with Hegel and continuing through the analytic and continental traditions. What began as an effort to shake off the scholasticism of the Middle Ages initiated a chain reaction of thought that extends to this very day. And as diverse as the philosophies that comprise the modern era may be, there is an undercurrent that unites them, a fundamental faith in the human capacity to figure things out.
So I think a common feature that characterizes modern philosophy and distinguishes it from medieval philosophy in particular, perhaps not so much from ancient philosophy, but from medieval philosophy, is the idea that human beings are capable of discovering, in the first instance, truth about nature on the basis of their own capacities. In a way, because of scientific progress on the one hand and religious and political conflict on the other hand, there was a sort of common need to find principles both of cognitive inquiry and of practical conduct that could reflect human capacities and not be dependent upon external, standardly divine authority.